I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends.
All right, welcome to another episode of Ohio Politics Explained. I'm Ohio Bureau Chief Anthony Shoemaker, filling in for Haley B. Miller this week. Joining me for a look back at 2025 and a look ahead at 2026 are Bureau reporters Laura Bischoff and Jessie Balmert. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
It might not be Prague, but at least we get to talk about politics.
We started off 2025 with a pretty major, the big story was the musical chairs in Ohio. J.D. Vance was sworn in as vice president in January, which opened up his U.S. Senate seat. President Trump early on was urging Vivek Ramaswamy to go for the Senate seat. The Governor DeWine appointed his Lieutenant Governor John Husted instead. Ramaswamy jumped in the governor race in January, and with an early endorsement from Trump. And then DeWine surprised a lot of people by naming former Ohio State coach Jim Tressel as lieutenant governor. All of that was really dominated Ohio politics in January. Jessie, were you surprised by any of those moves? What's happened since?
Yeah, sometimes when you think an odd year, you think we're not going to be talking about governor politics very much, but that was certainly not the case in 2025. Really, all of those dominoes fell, and you had Jim Tressel, who was considering a bid at one point. You had Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost, another Republican who ran for Ohio governor, but then dropped out after the Ohio GOP endorsed Ramaswamy. On the Democratic side, you have Dr. Amy Acton, probably best known for her assistance during the COVID-19 pandemic, who is running. And then we also had a former U.S. Representative, Tim Ryan, who was considering a bid for, it seemed like months on end. So he ultimately decided not to. But really, this race isn't starting until 2026, but we've had a lot of mileage out of it so far.
Yeah, I mean, Ramaswamy made his announcement in January of 2025, and it looked like you might have some primaries there for a while, but now it kind of looks like the field is pretty set.
Yeah, we'll see what happens out of the race. I think there's plenty still to talk about. It's going to be really interesting with two candidates who have no elected experience who could potentially replace Governor Mike DeWine, who has perhaps the most elected experience of anyone who's held that role.
Laura, what are your thoughts on all the musical chairs from this year?
You know, it's interesting. I think the Republicans are in a good position because they have so much high-profile candidates to put into all these different places and move around. It kind of reminds me of, after I guess maybe there was a lot of musical chairs, like when Jim Petro and Betty Montgomery and Ken Blackwell were all vying and interested in the governor. It seemed like the Republicans had a whole stack of candidates ready to
2006,
go. Yeah, 2006. Yeah. And then that ended up being a good year for the Democrats. That was like the last good year for the Democrats in Ohio.
Also, obviously, the domino that started the whole thing was J.D. Vance becoming the first vice president from Ohio. He made some news during his first year in the position, but when you're in the second job to President Trump, it's hard to make a lot of noise. Laura, any thoughts on Vance's year this year and the VP role he's taken on?
I think he's kind of threaded the needle of not outshining the president, but definitely being his a strong backer, very loyal, which I think the president values quite a bit. And it's unclear if once Trump is gone from the scene, if J.D. Vance is going to be the heir apparent. I think that's something he would like.
He definitely seems to be a more vocal, a more out there vice president than Mike Pence was in the first Trump administration, making
absolutely
more news. Jessie, we know one of your favorite topics this year was redistricting, the ongoing saga of congressional redistricting in Ohio. 2 Ohio seats, one in the Cincinnati area and then one in the Toledo area, are getting more Republican for the 2026 elections. In Akron, the Amelia Sykes district got a little bit more Democratic. Jessie, have you've been living this topic for the last few years. What happened? What's going on?
Yeah, this was kind of surprising that it didn't drag out all the way into November. And as I was watching states like Indiana and others that were, still in a kerfuffle over this into the Thanksgiving holiday, I was almost like, well, Ohio came to a conclusion in October at least. So essentially you had a bipartisan compromise. This was a unanimous decision to move forward with the map that you explained very well is going to shift more seats potentially to the Republican side. But I think Democrats see the ability to hold on to some of these seats, especially if it is a year that's good for Democrats, which historically has been the case 2 years after, a new president, or in this case, a returning president, gets into the office. So I think everyone wanted to avoid a referendum or a ballot issue, a lot of money, a lot of uncertainty, and so came to this conclusion. I think there's still a lot of criticism of this process and just the lack of transparency, because most Ohioans saw this, maybe 24, 48 hours before it was approved.
Yeah, and Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur, her district already is very Republican, but it's going to be even more Republican for her this cycle.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough district. And Marcy Kaptur is well known in that area, but in outside of Toledo, there's just a lot of Republican voters, and that has shifted over time and not to her advantage. So we'll see if she has a viable challenger, who that ends up being. I think Republicans are still kind of sorting that out, and there will be a primary in that race. So as we learned in the past, who she's competing against is going to make a difference.
Another big issue that was in the news this year is Ohio's budding recreational marijuana program. Voters overwhelmingly supported the legislation in 2023 legalizing recreational marijuana. The stores opened in late 2024, so this is kind of like the first full year of it in operation. Anything jump out at you guys about how that's gone?
Well, I think the major thing is that the prices are still very high compared to Michigan prices. And so a lot of people are still either going with their black market supplier or driving up to Michigan to get their supplies.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you drive to Detroit, right out, as soon as you get out of Toledo across the border, you just are swamped with billboards for marijuana. It's right at the state border. Michigan is definitely embraced that more than Ohio, obviously.
Yeah, I think once the prices come down in Ohio, we'll probably see a lot of those border dispensaries in southern Michigan close up shop. I thought one of the other big things was this the regulation of THC products that look like candy. And it's sold in gas stations and convenience stores without age regulations or any kind of really oversight. And this is something that the Governor DeWine has been very stridently against. And they made a move to block it by executive order. And they also blocked the sale of really popular THC infused carbonated beverages that are sold by breweries and, wine shops. And it wasn't until just a week or so ago in December that the lawmakers came up with a bill that is sort of a compromise on all those fronts.
Yeah, it was interesting seeing, when DeWine had the press conference a couple of months ago about this, holding up the bags of, regular candy and THC, candies, and just how similar those bags looked and how they're targeting children.
Yeah, there's been a lot happening on that front. Like you said, the Senate Bill 56 that lawmakers passed through, which is going to make a decent amount of changes. And then you also have Congress banning intoxicating hemp and those THC beverages, and that taking effect next year. So Ohio lawmakers are really trying to regulate this industry while it potentially is closing, but we expect a lot of lobbying is going to be happening in both DC and Columbus. That law also had that proposed law had a decent amount of changes for the marijuana industry as well, including, it could be harder to get an organ transplant or unemployment compensation or a variety of things. And the question is that what voters wanted when they approved this in 2023?
Yeah, it's also interesting how popular those THC beverages have become, especially since a lot of younger people are giving up on alcohol.
Right. I think that a lot of people just have shifted to that as, low calorie, no hangover.
Senate Bill 1 became law earlier this year, targeting diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at Ohio universities. SB 1 also banned teachers from weighing in on controversial topics. Jessie, you followed this. This new law really forced a lot of changes at Ohio universities. What are some of the issues that they're still dealing with?
Yeah. So as this was working its way through the legislature, if people recall, there was a predecessor to this that didn't pass at the end of 2024. And I think some people saw that as a victory, but Senator Jerry Serino, who was the real champion of this legislation, brought it back. Senate Bill 1, you can tell it was a priority for him and the Ohio legislature, and it went through. So it was eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. So different like centers for LGBTQ individuals or like women's centers. Some of those were either forced to close or rebrand. Another thing that you're seeing is there was a provision that if you didn't have enough people graduating from your degree program, they would basically automatically eliminate that degree. And so you're seeing some of that play out. Different universities are getting rid of different programs that there just isn't enough attendance or participation in under this new law.
I think there were some other kind of strange byproducts of Senate Bill 1 that weren't necessarily anticipated, including restrictions at Ohio State on how students can decorate common areas of dormitories. They're only allowed to just do school spirit stuff. And I think it has raised First Amendment issues.
Ohio's universities, you didn't really hear the presidents of these universities coming out and vehemently opposing Senate Bill 1, either because they liked the changes or because the Ohio legislature holds their purse strings.
Laura, in March, you did a major investigation into Ohio's failing dog laws. Your investigation led to lawmakers taking action on the issue, and they're making some major changes. Tell us more about that investigation.
Ohio's dangerous dog laws have a lot of flaws in them. Among them, a dog that kills a person does not automatically have to be put down. Under the new law, Avery's Law, which is named after Avery Russell, a 12-year-old kid from Columbus who was severely injured in an attack, that free kill provision in the law is going to go away. There's going to be bigger penalties for people who know that their dogs have aggressive tendencies and they don't take steps to protect the public or even just invited guests onto their property. This is something that lawmakers have tried to strengthen in the past and have failed. And I think that the fact that we did a multi-day series and we focus on Avery and the Eichelberger case in Pickaway County and some other really egregious and horrific attacks and showed how widespread dog bites are, I think that helped spur the lawmakers to take action.
One of the things really fascinating about this was, this is one of those things where anyone can be a victim, regardless of age, race, where you live. I mean, the stories were just from all walks of life in Ohio.
Yeah, I mean, Joanne Eichelberger, she was a retiree in Pickaway County, age 73, attacked in her condo complex by her neighbor's dogs. Avery had gone on a play date with a friend to Reynoldsburg and had gone into the house to use the bathroom, and the dogs attacked her there. Like I said, she's 12. We interviewed Michael Palmer up in Akron. He was a machinist who went to go help a neighbor on something, and the dogs came out and attacked him in the yard in the snow. Yeah,
and he, seriously has some real post-traumatic stress from that attack. You can hear it in the interviews that you guys did with him.
And Avery, Avery has panic attacks and flashbacks and nightmares. I mean, it's long-lasting.
Well, I wanted to ask you guys, what were some of your favorite stories that you did in the last year on anything you want to talk about?
Well, I'll do a serious one and a less serious one. I was able to dig into just some of the cost of childcare, which I think is an issue so many people struggle with. But how do we get to that price? Why is it so expensive? What are some of the things that we're doing or not doing as a state to help people out? And Ohio is one of 6 states that doesn't invest more than, the federal requirement into this. And I really enjoyed hearing from readers about just how this impacts them personally, how they feel like we can fix things in Ohio. And it's one of those things where I think there's a lot of good conversations going on, but, will that translate into policy? And then the fun one is I got to write about the effort to make the Buckeye the state candy in Ohio, which is being pitched by, of course, Senator Bill DeMora, a avid Ohio State fan. But it was also his legislative aide who worked for the Buckeye lady. And peanut butter and chocolate, you just can't go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't make the Buckeye the official state candy, I mean, what else would be the official state candy of Ohio? You know, it's really the only choice, right?
Maybe the Dum Dum. Those are made in Northwest Ohio.
They are. But do they have chocolate and peanut butter?
Right. Laura, what about for you?
There were a couple of stories that I really enjoyed doing this year. One published in June, it was the 10-year anniversary of the gay marriage decision from the U.S. Supreme Court, and we went and interviewed Ohioan Jim Obergefell. He's a very thoughtful and strong advocate for LGBTQ rights and causes, and so that was interesting to talk to him about, you know, how things have evolved over the last decade. I also had a good time talking with Mark Dan. He's the former Attorney General who resigned in 2015 under pressure and was under investigation. He ended up, you know, going back into practicing law and really has rebuilt his practice and focuses on consumer issues and has taken on a couple cases of statewide importance, including one having to do with the state teachers' retirement system and another challenging the use of unclaimed funds for building a new Brown Stadium. So those were two interesting ones. And then also in April, finally, 2 years after I was interviewed by documentary filmmaker Alex Gibney about the House Bill 6 case, that documentary came out on HBO. It's still available streaming. And it was just really interesting to see how a national group came in and pulled together a comprehensive documentary on such a big case in Ohio.
Yeah. Yeah, 2025 was definitely busy, and 2026 is going to be even busier for all of us. Let's talk for a second, looking ahead to next year, about the U.S. Senate race. Ohio set a record for the most expensive Senate race in American history in 2024, and that race between Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno. Moreno, you know, won that race with Trump on the ballot for president. Now Trump is not on the ballot, and Democrats have Sherrod Brown running again, this time against John Husted. What are your guys' thoughts on the Senate race and how that's shaping up?
I think it's going to be really interesting. These are two people who have plenty of years in politics. So these are not your outsider candidates. Sherrod Brown has been Secretary of State, obviously U.S. Senator, has been involved at like a state and federal level. And John Husted is a former Ohio House Speaker, Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State. So these are not your outsider candidates. There's going to be plenty of records to dig into, and it will be a good, just a way to test the sentiment of Ohio voters on President Trump and, you know, whether they want to have another one of his supporters in Congress.
Yeah, and with the Senate being so closely divided, I think the Democrats need to pick up like 3 seats, but there aren't a whole lot of Republican seats out there they can go after. So there'll be a lot of attention on Ohio.
You know, Jessie's totally right. Both of these guys are career politicians, well known to the voters. I think it's all going to, I mean, Ohio is a red state now. I think it's all going to, hinge on which way the political winds are blowing in November of 2026.
And the other thing that's interesting, you just talked about how you have 2 candidates running for the U.S. Senate who have decades of experience. And then on the governor's side, you have 2 candidates that have no elected experience.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You have Vivek Ramaswamy, who he ran for U.S. president, dropped out, endorsed Donald Trump. He was perhaps known from Department of Government Efficiency. He helped get that started, but really Elon Musk took it over. He is very wealthy compared to the average candidate, and has really just kind of barnstormed the state. He went to all 88 counties, is trying to drum up support. He pretty effectively got rid of his primary contenders by scoring early endorsements from President Trump and then the Ohio Republican Party more than a year ahead of the primary. And then on the other hand, you have former Ohio Department of Health Director, Dr. Amy Acton, who is, well known for the COVID-19 response, that people have strong feelings one way or the other, but she really was in people's, houses when they're listening to these daily press conferences, and she's been able to especially with no other challengers right now, been able to solidify some of that union support the Democrats so rely on.
Yeah, I would say that Ramaswamy being of Doge fame and Acton being of COVID fame, neither of those things were very popular.
Right. In addition to the big races on the ballot, people are keeping a close eye on potential ballot issues, and no other issue seems to be on the minds of Ohio voters more than property taxes right now. Rising home values caused many to see their taxes skyrocket, and lawmakers have passed some fixes. But taxpayers continue to say that they're drowning, and there's an effort to put an issue on the ballot next year that would abolish property taxes.
I mean,
what's
honestly,
the thought on that?
I mean, I think if it makes the ballot, there's a good chance it would pass. It's very, very popular. The idea of just wiping out property taxes. I mean, that's like saying mandating that everybody gets Friday off. Like
everyone hates property taxes.
Everybody would love to have Friday off. But it eliminate at your own risk. This could really throw Ohio schools into chaos.
And getting on the ballot's the hard part for them.
Yeah, I know we had an August ballot initiative a few years ago that said it's just so easy to amend the state constitution, but really it's quite hard. There's a large number of signatures you need to get. They need to be from at least 44 of the 88 counties. A lot of signatures are rejected because the person isn't registered to vote or they didn't sign it properly, etc. So this is like no small task, even if it is potentially, like Laura said, a pretty popular issue. Voters also just have a kind of cognitive dissonance on this because, as our colleague Haley reported, many tax levies were approved in fall of 2025, and yet people are still pretty upset about the property tax situation. And Ohio lawmakers have made a lot of changes that should reduce the burden pretty dramatically going forward and kind of include more things in the bucket of what doesn't get discounts and so forth. So Ohio's property taxes, you guys start talking about mills and it's just a good time had by all.
They are confusing. Are there any other issues in 2026 you guys are keeping an eye on or care about?
Well, I think there's a few, and it's like we said, it's really hard to tell what is going to make the ballot and what isn't, but there is a measure being put forth by LGBTQ advocates, one of which would basically reverse something that's on the Ohio Constitution that bans same-sex marriage. Now, right now, that is moot because of the Obergefell decision, legalized marriage across the nation. But if that were ever overturned by a different U.S. Supreme Court, this 2004 same-sex marriage ban is still in the Ohio Constitution. So that was one measure. It also had to be split from another effort they were doing, which would be to add some protections against discrimination for LGBTQ individuals. And so we'll see if either of those are able to make the ballot.
Well, thank you guys for joining us this week. We are going to be off for the next 2 weeks, so look for Ohio Politics Explained to return in early January.
Happy holidays.
Happy New Year.